Is Peter Martin. He has spent 7 years at the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See. That's the diplomatic representative of the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think a lot of us were surprised to see an American named Pope. Peter, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I was very surprised myself. I had didn't have him on my scorecard. I think it'll be a very different dynamic. But I think it is true that his background is so diverse that I think many of the cardinals in the conclave probably saw him not first and foremost as an American. As I say, I haven't studied his background before, but I've learned with everyone else how much time he spent in Peru. He's obviously a fluent Spanish speaker. And so I think that was part of the attraction. He is someone who has experience as a pastor, as a bishop, but he may have appealed to some of the Westerners as an American who also can connect with the Western world.
What can you tell us about his work in the United States and overseas? Do you see this as a continuation of the direction we were heading in with Pope Francis?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I think when a cardinal becomes pope, it's a new job and things can take new directions. But I think you could tell from his opening words that he had great esteem for Pope Francis. His words about building bridges and having a church that's open to all, I think, signifies his continuity with Pope Francis. And the fact that he chose Leo XIV as his name, first thing that came to my mind was Leo XIII, the previous pope, who was a big social justice advocate, someone who really built on the church's focus on the poor and workers. So I think you can, at least at the outset, expect a real continuation of Pope Francis's ideals.
What goes into the selection of a name? Can you walk us through that process?
Well, and I should say I was a U.S. diplomat, not a theologian, and I wasn't one of the very few to be inside a conclave.
Okay.
But I think that it's true that you want to look at historical precedent. I mean, for Pope Francis, he cared very much about Francis of Assisi, who was the saint who cared for the poor above all. He was someone who was like Francis, someone who cared for those in the peripheries. So I think that was his focus. Pope John Paul II. He chose, I think, Pope John Paul as a name because Pope John Paul I had lived only such a short time. It seemed only right to continue his very brief legacy. So I think you look to history and certainly to what you want to accomplish as Pope.
There was a lot of conversation about this being the most diverse pool of cardinals to be representing 70 countries. What does that say to you that they did select an American?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I was thinking it could very well have been someone from the global South. But as I say, I think he's primarily identified not just as an American. I think the great amount of time he spent in Peru was important. And I think you won't be seeing him portray himself first and foremost as an American. I mean, now he's the Pope, he's the head of the Universal Church. And I mean, I remember working with Vatican officials when I was at the Holy See, at the embassy there, and I worked with some Vatican officials who were Americans, but when I dealt with them, they were officials of the Holy See. They weren't officials who said, I'm an American first and foremost. So it'll be a really interesting dynamic. I mean, first American Pope, and see how he develops in that way. And you also noticed in his opening words, he didn't speak in English. He didn't show that side of himself. So it'll be very interesting to see how it works out.
What do you think are some of the immediate challenges that are facing him?
Well, I think that the Holy See is first and foremost concerned with, on the international stage, which I dealt with, war and peace issues. And of course, we know the hotspots all over the world, and Pope Francis was very engaged in the Middle East and Ukraine, doing his best to help promote peace. So I think on the international stage, that'll be the most important thing for the Pope. Internally, in terms of administration, there have been a lot of reports that the Vatican finances are in trouble and they need to continue to revamp finances, really modernize the way that they deal with money in a way that Pope Francis and his associate Cardinal Pell did. In terms of theological aspects of the church, I'll leave that to theologians, but I think you'll have a full plate there too.
Were you somewhat surprised by how quickly they reached this decision? to elect a new pope?
Well, I was surprised that if they did come out so relatively quickly, that it was someone who wasn't really among the favorites. I thought that if it was going to be someone a little bit off the radar, I thought that would take a little longer. So when they said Habemus Papam, I was thinking it was probably going to be Cardinal Parolin, possibly Cardinal Zuppi, some of the people that have been talked about in the media. So yeah, I was surprised that things coalesced so quickly around Leo the 14th.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for joining us at this hour on this breaking story, the selection of a new pope. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks to you.